The Kira Talent interview is designed to catch you off guard. You've only got a few seconds to think and then you're recording. But here's the truth. Once you know how to structure your answers, you'll sound clear, confident, and authentic. In this video, I'll share my 3 proven frameworks that I teach my clients to answer any question and stand out. Hi, I'm Caitlin Anderson, graduate admissions consultant and Oxford MBA who has helped hundreds of students win interviews and offers to all the top business schools in the world, including Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, MIT, and Yale, and win over $1 million in scholarships. Let's start with the foundation. Every strong answer will follow this shape: introduction, body, conclusion. In the introduction, you're going to frame your response clearly and directly. In the body, you're going to provide your supporting points or a story. And in the conclusion, you're going to tie it all together with a reflection, takeaway, or connection to you. For every Kira question you get, you're gonna use this structure: the introduction, body, and conclusion. What will change is how we choose to fill these 3 parts based on different types of questions. Within this framework, we have several specialized frameworks for different kinds of questions. First, we have the STARL structure. We use this one when you get a behavioral question, such as, tell me about a time when you failed, tell me about a time when you worked with a difficult colleague, tell me about a time when you worked on a diverse team. Those are all behavioral questions, and you would use the STARL method. Now, STARL stands for situation, task, action, result, and lessons learned, where the S and the T are going to be your intro, the A and the R are going to be your body, and the L is going to be your conclusion. Now, let's take an example. We will answer the question, tell me about a time when you led a team under pressure, using our STARL structure. So let's start with the S and the T. Last summer, I led a team at my current company to deliver a client report in half the usual time. This had never been done within our company, so I was a bit nervous but eager to take up this challenge. For the A and the R, we might say, I have a tendency to avoid delegation because I don't want to burden those around me. However, under pressure, this is a weakness because I need to rely on my team more. So I decided to take the leap and restructure the workflow so I could delegate more tasks to my team. We delivered early and the client signed on for another project. What was even more fulfilling was how strong my bonds with my team became afterwards. They felt empowered because I trusted them with more responsibilities. For the L, we might say, I realized people respond very well when you trust them, and it actually gets better for me. Since this experience, I have spent a lot more time finding the right balance of handling what I can myself and delegating the rest to my team. This is what I will continue refining throughout my career. Next up, we have the bucket structure. And this is going to be used for questions where you have multiple responses within that question, usually in the form of a list for values you're listing you have, or for traits that you think are important for a leader. So it would be questions such as, what makes a good communicator? Or how do you define leadership? Or why our school? Or why our program? So the way you're going to use this structure is you're going to start your intro with a clear claim and list out your 2, 3, maybe 4 key ideas or the buckets that you're going to use. And then you start on your body, which is then going to be broken down into how many ever buckets you've decided. And within each bucket, you need to explain it first, a sentence or two, and then the rest of that bucket needs to be used on providing evidence, a story, a fact, or some proof of what you are saying is important. Now let's take an example of how to use the bucket structure. We'll answer the question, what makes someone a strong communicator? So we need to start with our introduction, which is going to include a quick list of our buckets. So we might say something like, great communication comes down to clarity, empathy, and consistency. So we've chosen 3 buckets for this answer. Bucket number 1 is clarity, bucket number 2 is empathy, bucket number 3 is consistency. Now that we've outlined these buckets to our listener in the introduction, we're gonna take them and put them into our body. And this is how our body is gonna be structured. Bucket number 1, clarity. Bucket number 2, empathy. Bucket number 3, consistency. And within each bucket, we're gonna start by explaining what we mean with this idea first. So we explain what we mean by clarity, making somebody a strong communicator. But then we use the bulk of that bucket with an example. So we give an experience, something that happened to us, but it needs to be very short, obviously, because Kira, usually you have less than 2 minutes to respond. But you give a quick example, then you go to bucket number 2, empathy. You explain what you mean by empathy being important for a strong communicator. And then you use the bulk of that second bucket on an example of when you saw that to be true. And then you do the same thing for bucket number 3. And then you end with your conclusion. So remember that your conclusion needs to include some reflection or some takeaway. And this is especially true for Kira because the admissions committees are trying to get an understanding of your EQ, your ability to connect your experiences with the world around you and understand human behavior and how the world works in a better way. So in the conclusion, you have to have some type of reflection or takeaway. So we might say something like, these traits have helped me avoid misalignment and build trust, especially in diverse teams. I will continue to practice clarity, empathy, and consistency when I communicate so I can improve the outcomes for those around me. And finally, we have the 2-part structure. And this is going to be used for questions that have a natural split. For example, what are your short-term and long-term goals? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you balance results and relationships? What do you bring now and what do you want to grow into? The way the 2-part structure is going to work is in your introduction, you're going to start by framing your answer with a common thread. And then in your body, you're now going to have your 2 answers. After your first answer, you want to have a mini conclusion. You don't want to just end it. They don't know that you're done with your first part. So have a mini conclusion, and then after that, you give your second answer, and then you have your final conclusion, which is the main conclusion. So that one needs to have a takeaway, a reflection. It needs to show how the 2 parts relate again, or refer back to your overall message. Let's take an example of the 2-part structure. We need to answer the question, what are your short-term and long-term goals? So we need to start with our introduction. And remember, we need to connect our 2 answers. So we might say something like, my short-term and long-term goals are connected by my passion for sustainable finance. Now we need to divide our body into these 2 main parts. So in the first part, we're gonna have the short-term goal, and then in the second part, we're gonna have the long-term goal. So for the short-term goal, we can say something very simple like, my short-term goal is to work in ESG consulting for company A doing X, Y, and Z. And then for the long-term goal, we can say something like, in the long term, I hope to launch my own firm that advises governments and businesses on climate investment strategies. Then for our conclusion, we need to refer back to our thread, which was the passion for sustainable finance. So we might say something like, in these ways, I hope to leave a lasting impact in the world of sustainable finance. So how do you choose which structure to use? Well, ask yourself, is it a behavioral question? If so, you need to use the STARL structure. Is it a question asking me to list something like traits, values, beliefs, ideas? Then you need to use the buckets structure. If you're being asked for two different things, short-term versus long-term, now versus future, you need to use the two-part structure. Remember that each of these specialized structures fits within the introduction, body, and conclusion. So if you're panicking and you've got a question you're not sure how to structure, default back to what's your intro, what's your body going to be like, and what's your conclusion. The secret isn't memorizing answers. It's learning how to structure your thoughts. The introduction, body, and conclusion is your foundation. And the three specialized frameworks that we talked about will help you stay organized and sound your best even when that clock is ticking down. Do you want to see an even more detailed breakdown of how to use the STARL structure? Well, you can click on the link above me for the Cura Talent written questions. And in that video, I go into a lot of detail on this one very long example so you can see how to use it better. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe. It'll help keep the channel alive. I give weekly advice on how to get into the top business schools around the world. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.